Welcome to the May Blue Trails Guide webinar. My name is Faye Augustin, and I'm a Conservation Director with American Rivers. I'm excited to welcome you to Green Infrastructure, nature that builds community, wellness, and learning. A couple of quick things before we get started. As a reminder, if your connection is lost at all during the webinar, please go ahead and log in again using your unique web link and passcode that was provided to you when you registered with GoToWebinar. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be available next week on the 30th of May at bluetrailsguide.org/blog. We'll also send around an email with a link to the recorded webinar at that time. And then one other thing to note, this is a webinar, so there is approximately a 3 to 5 second delay when the slides move forward. So I ask that you be patient with myself and our presenter, Kristin Lo Verde. As a reminder, we always encourage questions throughout the webinar. There is a question box in the GoToWebinar side panel of the GoToWebinar box. And you can ask questions throughout the webinar that pertain to the information that Kristin is sharing. And we'll leave about 5 minutes at the end of the webinar to answer as many of those questions as we can. And then that information will again be available on the recorded webinar on the 30th of May. So without further ado, I will stop talking and turn it over to our presenter today, Kristin Lo Verde, who is the manager of Green Schoolyards with Openlands. As the manager of Green Schoolyards, Kristin Lo Verde manages Space to Grow, greening Chicago Schoolyards and the Building Schools Garden program. She's been a part of the Openlands team since moving back to Chicago in 2008. Kristin has been working in the environmental field for over 20 years throughout the state of Illinois. Before joining the Openlands team, she worked for Southern Illinois University as the project coordinator at Touch of Nature Environmental Center. She has a Bachelor of Science in Natural Resource and Environmental Science from the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. So without further ado, I will go ahead and turn it over to Kristin.
Great, thank you, Faye, and thank you all for joining us this morning. So as Faye mentioned, my name is Kristin Lo Verde, and I am the manager of Green Schoolyards at Openlands. And just to give you a little bit of background about Openlands, we are a conservation organization up here in northeastern Illinois. We work a little bit up into Wisconsin as well as into Indiana. As an organization, we believe that nature is vital to all people. So through our work, we connect people to nature in different ways. And so our programs are kind of, I guess, scattered across the board, I would say a bit. So we have pedaling programs, and we work on pedaling trails as well as hiking trails. We do preservation and restoration work. We do a lot of advocacy work. And then specifically with our neighborhood programs that really focuses in the city of Chicago, we have our tree planters programs in which we have tree keepers, which right now we are at about 2,000 people, residents of the Chicagoland area, who are trained to take care of the urban forests here. As well as we do tree planting programs throughout different communities. We work with community gardens. We have a birding program that is in some of the schools that we work with, as well as our school gardens, and then the Space to Grow program. So today I'm going to talk to you about Space to Grow, greening Chicago schoolyards. So Space to Grow is actually built off of our Building School Gardens program. So Building School Gardens, we have worked with 63 Chicago public schools in creating school gardens on their campus. In about 2012, here in Chicago, recess was reinstated. So prior to that, it's kind of hard for me to even believe, but prior to that, recess was not a mandate, so not all students were having recess. So starting in 2012, it was mandated. And us, so we were already working in the Chicago public school system, as well as our managing partners, Healthy Schools Campaign, was also working within the school system. And so we began talking and discussing on ways that we can work together to create our schoolyards to be able to support recess, as well as some other health initiatives, as well as outdoor learning and stormwater management. So that leads us into our partners for the program. Oh, you know what? I went too fast there. So as I mentioned, Openlands and Healthy Schools Campaign, we are the managing partners of the program. So we work very closely with the school communities prior to implementing the program, as well as once the schoolyards are complete. Our funding partners are the Chicago Public Schools, the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago, as well as the City of Chicago Water Management. We also have some evaluation partners, so the United States Geological Services, as well as the Loyola University and the University of California. And they really work on the evaluation piece. So the USGS is monitoring and evaluating the stormwater aspect, not only the amount of stormwater that is being captured on site, as well as the quality of the water that's being captured. And then Loyola and the University of California is looking at the health and wellness impact that the schoolyards are having, not just on the students, but on the community as a whole. The goal of the program is to transform Chicago's outdated schoolyards into vibrant outdoor places that benefit the kids, communities, and the environment. And on the side there, you'll see that our three main goals are the health and wellness, outdoor learning, and stormwater management. The health and wellness aspect is so to create these schoolyards to support the health and wellness initiatives that the Chicago Public Schools is implementing, not just the recess, but also the physical education policies to address high childhood obesity rates, and also to create green spaces and play areas. The outdoor learning aspect comes in is that I'll show you a before and after picture and kind of highlight the different features of the schoolyards, but all of the schoolyards do have gardens to provide that daily connection to nature, as well as opportunities to provide hands-on opportunities and activities, as well as to increase the awareness of environmental issues, as well as to educate our future environmental stewards. And then our third goal is the stormwater management piece. So all of the schoolyards are designed to capture at least 150,000 gallons of water. Some of them are right at that 150,000 gallon level, and some of them are a little bit higher, just based on the size of the schoolyard. So these are designed to capture that stormwater right where it falls. Here in Chicago, we have a combined sewer system in which our stormwater as well as our sewage goes into the same sewers. And so decreasing the amount of water that goes into the sewers, especially when we have the high rains, is very, very important. And through the stormwater management piece, we also are able to work with the communities, not only on educating them on the practices that are being used at the schoolyard, but also what are some things that they can do at their homes to help manage stormwater. Oops, sorry about that. Okay. So this is one of our schools. This is Grissom Elementary School, which is at the southeast side of Chicago. It's actually like borders right onto Indiana. So this schoolyard has about close to an acre of asphalt. So this was in 2013, about an asphalt of impermeable surfaces. So when it rained, all the stormwater was sheeting off right into the sewers. There's a couple sewers that are on the schoolyard, and so when we had very high rains, there were times where the schoolyard would be completely underwater, in which the school then would call their schoolyard Lake Grissom. And this is an aerial of what the schoolyard looks like currently. So I am going to use my mouse to kind of call out some of the elements on here. So this area right here, it's still asphalt. It was resealed and this track was put in, but it was also graded to where the stormwater that hits the space is going into this permeable area here. Right here we have permeable turf. All of these little spaces here are native plants, native gardens, and rain gardens as well. This one is a rain garden. The material that's underneath the playgrounds is also like a permeable rubber. This is their outdoor classroom here that is made of permeable pavers, as well as this area is a permeable pavers as well. These squiggly little areas here, those are the school's edible garden. Here in Chicago, there's quite a few organizations and partners that we work with, and this is one of them. It's called Big Green, and they work primarily with edible gardens. These are their beds, and they work very closely with the school in supporting them and getting the teachers out there using the edible gardens with their students. This area here and this area here are both permeable asphalt. So this schoolyard, with the size of it, as I had mentioned how each of the schoolyards do capture 150,000 gallons of water, this one catches up to 252,000 gallons of water. So with the evaluation that I had mentioned previously with the USGS, so it has been found that since this was installed in the fall of 2014, that the schoolyard has captured all of the water and has held onto the water on site. So here in Chicago, we have about 630 Chicago public schools. And so in order to be transparent with our work, we needed to come up with some criteria that we were looking at. So the criteria that we do look for, there's a couple different stages, but first of all, we look at the size of the schoolyard. The schoolyard needs to be at least 30,000 square feet or larger. We look at the amount of impervious surfaces. We look at the community as a whole and the amount of flooding that is happening in the community. And we also look at their playgrounds. So some of the schools do not have playgrounds, or they have very old playgrounds that aren't used because they are dangerous. So we are able to narrow down the schools, and then we invite specific schools to apply to the program. And then from there, we look a little bit more in depth as to like the needs of the school, as well as some of their health and wellness initiatives that they have at the school. We look at the park deficit within the area as well, and whether or not the school is ready to take on the schoolyard. Lastly, we sit down with all of our partners, and then we have a review of all the applications, and then we choose who will be the next schools that we will begin to work with. So currently we have 9 schools that are constructed. 3 schools are currently under construction right now, and then 2 more schools will begin construction over the summer. Our goal is to have 34 schools completed by the fall of 2022. Before I go into our process, I just wanted to point out is that throughout the whole program, community engagement is very important. So all of these schools are public schools, therefore these spaces are open to the public. Every school is, the design for each school is very unique to that specific school community. Therefore, we work very closely with the whole school community. So when I'm talking about school community, I'm talking about the students, the teachers and staff, the administration, the parents, and then the community members, as well as the community members or community organizations that are in that community. The next slide will show us what our process looks like and kind of like what the timeline looks like. Usually we begin working with a school at the beginning of the school year, and we have about 4 months to do an orientation for the school, as well as to hold some planning meetings, in which I'll talk about in a little bit. Then usually those are done by the beginning of the new year, so like January, and then we are working with the designers on they're creating the construction documents. Ideally, we like the projects to go out to bid around the beginning of April, with construction then beginning usually at the end of the school year. So it's about a 6-month process from working with the school community to starting construction. So our first couple meetings with the school community, we have the first one is an open house style. It's usually like a 4 to 5 hour day in which during the school day, we are working with the students as well as the teachers and staff there in gathering just information. So currently, information about what is currently happening on the schoolyard and what they would like to see on the schoolyard to support the curriculum. We also then are there at the end of the school day and then into the evening so that parents can come and attend as well as the school community as a whole. So we gather all this, and this is just some examples of some of the stations that we have here. So we have a mapping station in which we're gathering information about the schoolyard, but also as the area around the schoolyard. And the next picture just kind of shows like a photo survey that we've done. So we gather all that information and we give that to the designers, and they take that and create a concept design. So we'll go back to the school about a month later and we'll share the concept designs with the school community, and then at this time they're still able to give feedback about what they like about the concept design, or if there's any issues or red flags, or if there was something that we missed. From there, all that information is given to the designers once again, and then they create a final design that we'll share with the larger community. And at this point, they still have an opportunity to give feedback, but it's pretty close to the final design. So once we do have that final design, the construction documents are created, and then construction begins. The construction is usually about a 12 to 16 week process. So if we begin right at the end of the school year, which is usually the end of June, it usually goes into like the first month or so when school comes back into the fall. Once school is back and the schoolyard is ready to be opened, we have days with the students in which every student at the school comes out and they plant at least one plant where they help with mulching the areas, as well as we hold community planting events as well. So making sure that the parents are coming out and giving the community members and the community organizations an opportunity to come out and help out as well. We also host different workshops for the community. So you'll see on the right side there's a rain barrel there. So we do have a stormwater workshop that focuses on, we definitely share with the community on what is happening at the schoolyard, and like describing on how the schoolyard is construction and what those elements are. And then we go into talking about what are some best practices that they can do at home. So we usually raffle off about 5 rain barrels per workshop, as well as a flat of native plants per workshop. In addition to the workshops for the community, we also have workshops for the teachers. And these really are pretty curriculum heavy, I would say. So working with them in and then showing them how they can use their new outdoor space to support their classroom work that they're doing. And those professional developments is really focused on our three main goals. So really focusing on the health and wellness, outdoor learning, and stormwater management. So in addition to the workshops, we also host other events as well. And I will say that these are very, they're kind of geared toward the school community. So every event looks a little bit different. Originally, it started off looking like we were holding like stewardship events to where we would invite the students or the school community as a whole to come out and to help us steward the native gardens as well as the edible gardens. And sometimes they've morphed into more of like community, I guess, parties in a way. So we'll have different organizations from the community coming out, doing different activities, as well as doing the stewardship of the schoolyards. Measuring our progress. So we are constantly evaluating our progress, our process, and just always kind of changing it to reflect on what we're hearing from our evaluations. So for example, our whole process that we do with the open house and the other concept design, sharing that process looks a little bit different than how it first looked like back in 2014. So we're constantly getting information from the communities that we're working with and trying to strengthen the program so that it's best created to support their school community. We have the evaluation that's happening through Loyola and the University of California. And as I mentioned, it's looking at not just the students, but the community as a whole and how the space is being used. So whether or not it's being used after school, during the summers, and how the community actually views the schoolyard. And lastly is the stormwater component. So looking at the quantity that we are capturing as well as the quality of that water that we're capturing. Okay, and that is our Space to Grow program. Is there any questions, or do I turn this over? I think I turn it over to Faye right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. No problem. Thank you so much, Kristin, for that really great presentation. It was awesome to hear about all of the great work that you are doing with Space to Grow. So as Kristin mentioned, we will go ahead and open it up for questions at this point. So just a reminder, if you do have questions, I would ask that you type them into the question box that is available on your GoToWebinar side panel. We've got a little over 5 minutes for questions, so that's great. So we've got a few that have populated in the box already, so we'll go ahead and start. Kristin, one of the questions that has been asked is, what is the greatest, I guess there's kind of two parts to this. The first one is, what are some of the opportunities that Space to Grow identified in, or that Openlands identified in starting Space to Grow? And the second part of that question, what are some of the challenges that you guys have experienced as a part of this program?
Yes, great question. So with the opportunities, so as I had mentioned, is that Openlands was working in some of the schools through our Building School Gardens program, and then our partners, Healthy Schools campaign, was also working in some of the schools. So we had worked a little bit previously to this program, worked together previously before this program, and then really started talking a lot more and in depth, especially when the recess was reinstated, and then they also increased the amount of PE that students would be receiving. And so, some of these schoolyards were not able to support the recess or the PE policies. So that definitely began a more in-depth conversation between the two organizations. And then Openlands, through some of our other work, we knew that the water partners, so the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago and the City of Chicago Water Management, we knew that they were had a consent decree in which they needed to get water into the ground. And so the Chicago Public Schools, they are the second largest landowners here in Chicago. And so that conversation then started. I would say the conversation began in early, probably like 2012, and our first schoolyard broke ground in the summer of 2014. So it was a couple years of a lot of conversations.
Kristin, are you still there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Now we can. Yes, you're back.
Oh, sorry. where did I leave off, or where did you guys leave
You
off
were
at?
just talking about in 2012.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so 2012 is when the conversation started, and then we broke ground on our first schools in the summer of 2014. So it was a couple years of conversations happening. Some challenges that we face, we do have, as I mentioned, is that we have 3 different capital funders. And so there has been some challenges in making sure that we have that funding secured every year. And that's something that we are all working on with our partners to make sure that moving forward that, especially if we begin to work with the school, just making sure that that funding is in place so that way we are able to implement the schoolyard.
Excellent. Thanks, Kristin. Another question for you. There's a number of folks who are on the webinar who are not in the Chicago area. And one of the questions is if you're aware of other groups or other programs similar to Space to Grow in other areas across the country. And if you aren't aware, are there kind of resources or follow-up that you would recommend that folks could use to learn more about how to start a program like this?
Yes, absolutely. And actually, it's interesting that this webinar is happening today. Right now, there is a leadership summit that started yesterday. I think it's Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of this week in Oakland, California. That is all focused on green schoolyards. I think there's about over like 200 people that are attending that leadership summit. There are programs, I will say for Space to Grow is that we definitely looked at other programs to help us shape what Space to Grow would look like here in Chicago. There were programs in Denver and Philadelphia, and I believe there's some in New York, there's in Boston. On our Space to Grow on our website, there is a National Schoolyards report that's on there that talks about some of the different programs that are out there, as well as the Children in Nature Network. They do have a Green Schoolyards area on their website as well that is gathering information, not just nationally, but internationally as well. So I would definitely recommend you looking at that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kristin, for that helpful information. And I think we have time for one more question before we wrap up today. And that question is a little bit more about kind of about the funding model for your program. And it's just getting a little bit more clarification on what you mentioned earlier. So you said you have the 3 capital partners. What was the main driver for each of those capital partners, and how would you recommend approaching funding partners or potential new funding partners for a program like this elsewhere?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, definitely the two capital partners, so the water folks, it was definitely leveraging the stormwater piece, the stormwater management piece, and working with them to identify best practices on what can be done on the schoolyards in order to capture an X amount of water that they need for their descent decrees. CPS was a partner as well. I mean, the work is happening on their schoolyard, and they're also putting in funding, and just knowing that there are other partners that are willing to put in funding, I think really strengthened their commitment to do the program. So each of those partners they put in $500,000 for the capital piece. And then Openlands and Healthy Schools campaign, we actually fundraise separately to be able to do that, the community engagement piece, as well as to provide the ongoing support to make sure that these spaces are being taken care of, as well as being used by the school community as a whole. As for recommendations, like I think it's thinking about who are the organizations that are in your area, and really finding ways that they can connect to a program like this. So definitely, you know, that health and wellness piece, the outdoor learning, and in this case, the stormwater management. But there's probably some other organizations out there that I could see that would support this as well.
Excellent. That was very helpful, Kristin. Thank you so much. And as just a quick reminder for folks, this webinar was recorded, and I will post the webinar, send the webinar around to this group early next week. I'll also send around a link to both to the report that Kristin mentioned and a link to the Children in Nature Network as well. Kristin, if you're comfortable with it, I will probably share your contact email as well in case folks have additional questions they want to follow up with you on.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Kristin, for a really helpful and educational webinar. I so appreciate your time educating all of us about Space to Grow. And I am so grateful for the work that you are doing for the city of Chicago. And then thank you to all of you on the webinar who participated today. I appreciate you taking the time out of your morning or early afternoon to join us for the May Blue Trails Guide webinar. And stay tuned for a list of webinars that are coming up in the next couple of months. So we look forward to having you join us in the next couple of months. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you all.
Thank you.